On this video I'm going to talk to you about some early season grasses, and as you know I absolutely love ornamental grasses and I've got quite a number in this garden, but tonight we'll go through a few of the ones that I think we need to pay particular attention to at this time of year. So this one's called Calamagrostis acutiflora calforsta, and it's a sterile hybrid. It gets to about 7 foot in seed. So when I'm talking about grasses, I usually give the ultimate height, but I'm usually talking about the size of the seed head and its ultimate height. It's a great grass because it produces a lovely seed head that's sort of purplish tinged, which starts quite open and splayed, and then it tightens up into this straw coloured, almost pipe cleaner look. It's definitely worth having in your garden because you can either plant this one as a single specimen, which I shall show you in a minute, or you can do mass planting like this, and this is how I like to see it, planted en masse like this. And the reason I like it like this is because when the wind blows, it has this look that's hard to beat on a lot of grasses because it just billows, and it always reminds me of cornfields when I was a kid. So barley fields when they used to sway, you could see the wind dancing through them, and this does pretty much the same. So the wind's starting to catch it a little bit at the moment, and it's doing that dance, but when it gets its actual seed heads, or flowers as I like to call them, then it's a real nice one. So worth looking out, definitely worth getting. Now Calamagrostis is quite a big family. This one here is called Waldenbush, Calamagrostis Waldenbush, and it has an altogether fresher look really compared to Calforsta, and it's a brighter green, produces a similar flower, but it's more splayed out, so it leans to the left, the right, back and forwards a little bit more than what Calforsta does. Calforsta is strictly upright, clump forming, and this is more of a looser clump. So that's Calamagrostis Waldenbush. Now if we wander over here to my nursery area, we can show you one or two other Calamagrostis that are worth looking at this time of year. I've got these all together at the moment. They never look the best in grasses, in pots. They never ever look as good in a pot as they do in the garden. Now this one is called Calamagrostis Avalanche, and it has this lovely central stripe in it, creamy stripe, and then when it sets its seed it has a stalk that comes up from it that is also creamy coloured, which is quite a surprise, especially when once the seeds start opening up, they're purple, and then within them is this creamy look. That's a real nice one. So we've also got, I'm just looking to see what else I've got in here. I've got one called Eldorado, and I absolutely love this one, and this has a golder look about it. Oh, that's not showing you. Let's get it out of there. So this one's called Eldorado, and it has this lovely look, lovely fresh look, and I really highly rate this one. It's a beauty, and I'll show you one up the garden that's a little bit bigger than this one that's in the garden, just to show you the difference that they look as opposed to being in the pot. The pot, when you get them in pots, you got to excessively feed them early on with nitrogen and hope that they will produce lots and lots of leaves, whereas in the garden they'll just do that naturally. So that's Calamagrostis Eldorado. So this is Calamagrostis Eldorado as a clump, and this is in my dry area of the gravel garden, and this has been in here for the past year and it's doing really well. So you can see what a difference it makes having it actually in the garden or in some soil of some description. Now a lot of grasses prefer a sandy type soil, but this is chalk up here, but it's taking quite well to it, and they're very adaptable, to be honest with you. I've had them in both sand, chalk, and I don't think I've ever had them in heavy clay, but they do quite well in your average soil anyway. So that's Calamagrostis Eldorado, and I really do like it because once you start sending up all those seed heads, as I said earlier, it'll have a creamy coloured actual stalk, a bit like Avalanche, and again produces the purpley toned seed heads, and they look really nice. But again, it's these two, what I've shown you, is still not as good as Carl Forster, but nevertheless worth seeking out. So we're quite early at the moment, but this is pretty much an evergreen. And this year, a lot of them have suffered a little bit because we had that hoarfrost that lasted for quite some time up in Lincolnshire in the UK. And it knocked a lot of them back. So the strawy coloured bits you can see, they are the dead and dying bits of it. But they had some sort of interest to it, so I tend to leave them alone. What I could have done early on was actually cut this back into a clump of about 6 inches for me. I like to do it at a 6-inch clump. And it probably would have looked better at that point, because it would have sent up fresher green looking leaves. But I don't mind it looking like this. Now this is called Anamanthele lesoniana. It used to be called Stipa arundinacea, or the pheasant tail grass. And the reason it's called the pheasant tail grass is because supposedly the leaves look like pheasant tails. Now I grew up in a village where there was lots and lots of pheasants, and you've got to have a pretty good imagination to believe that that looks like a pheasant tail. But we'll go with it. So that's a nice clumping grass, but it's very short-lived. But early season, this is a good one to have because it can give you that interest that you're looking for, or should be looking for. So that's Anamanthele lesoniana, a real nice one. So that's the shady border that's sat in, and it does really, really well in there. Gets to about 2 foot, I would say, over time, 2 foot, both in height and in width. Produces seed heads that the birds love. Very easy to get out. Will seed around a lot. So I recommend that you actually sort that out and remove the seed heads if you can. And at a certain time in the year, and I think it's about July, August time when it produces its seeds, it's easy to pull them out. And I recommend that you probably do once you've enjoyed the seeds for a bit, if you don't want it to self-seed all over the place, because that one will self-seed quite a lot. So while we're up here, we'll go to this one. This is another early season grass. This is Hackana macra. Still a small clump, but it looks lovely, and it makes 2 foot by 2 foot, probably up to 3 foot if you get the right conditions. And it's a really nice clump former again, that produces a lovely seed a bit later on, sort of July, August time, produces, maybe even September, produces this lovely seed that's hard to explain on here, but when you see it, or if you get one of these and you see the seeds, you'll see what I mean. It's a beauty. Definitely worth having. There are different varieties of this. I've got Samurai and Oriolata in this garden, and this one is just macra, ordinary macra, which is green. The others are stripy, and we'll have a look at those in a minute. Now while we're here, we'll look at this. This is a miscanthus. A miscanthus, although not very early, some of them can be earlier. And this one is a sinensis type, and this is actually my own spore, or my own plant, that I'm trialling at the minute, and it came through Gold Bar, and I'm calling this Pixie. It has this lovely red finish as it gets going. Well, finish. It starts with a nice red leaf, although it's not there yet. As summer approaches, the leaf will turn this lovely shade of red. It's very small. This is why I've kept this one, and as it was a sport, it's worth hanging on to anyway. And a sport is something that comes from its parent plant, so it's stuck to the parent plant by a root, so that's how you can tell if it's a sport. And if you've had to clip it away from the parent, then you know it's a sport, and it's often worth keeping that, because what it's doing is it's sporting out into something different, and that's what this one's done. It has this lovely, lovely red flower in sort of August, September time. The colour will be amazing. It'll go these lovely colours. So while we're here up this end of the garden, I'll show you some of the colours that will make a little bit later on. This is another miscanthus, and it'll make those types of colour. So it's not available, that other one, because that is one I've been trialling for 4 years now. But while we're here, we'll do this one as well. This is miscanthus. Now, miscanthus are not really known for early season interest, really. They're just starting to grow. They really kick in once the light starts to get less during the day, and that sort of invigorates them and makes them grow faster. but nevertheless it's worth getting them at this stage. And this is called Samurai. There's too many miscanthus to go through, so I'm not really going to talk too much about them on this video. We'll go through those again later in the year once all the other ones are actually flowering as well, so we can try to show you some sort of difference, because a lot of people think that miscanthus are all the same, but they're not. Now this is Elymus magellanicus, and this is the blue wheatgrass, or blue wheat Magellan grass, I think is its common name. I don't like to use common names because I've said before, you need to know the Latin names so that if you go to another country, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. So that's Elymus magellanicus, and it's probably the bluest of all the grasses, and it has this lovely light powdery blue, as you can see, and that's almost, well, that is from the word go. Now this has remained evergreen for me this year, and it's in the gravel area, as you can see, but it's a real beauty, and it's starting to send out its seed heads, which actually just go straw coloured, and they're not really that interesting, if I'm honest about it. It doesn't want to focus in on that, but it never does it? So it's there. It's not, there we go, that's got it. So they're not very interesting at the moment, but they do go a little bit taller than that. They'll get to about 1.5 to 2 foot. But it's the leaf that you get these for. Now these do gently seed around. There's, I've probably stood on one at the minute. Yeah, can't find it. Anyway, there's one here, so they'll seed gently around. So there's one there, then there's another one here. I'll try and keep my eye out for them. And then another couple there, and another one there. So they do all right. Oh, actually, there's another one here as well. So they do all right. And I really do like them because they're not any trouble at all, really, apart from self-seeding around, which is, to be quite honest with you, is very, what's the word for it? It's not a lot. They don't seed around a lot, so they're not too aggressively seeding. Now, this one here is always going to have interest because, again, it's an evergreen. It's quite a big one, so you need to be very careful with this one. So this one is a cortadera, so it's a pampas grass, and you all fear well, a lot of people fear pampas grasses, but you shouldn't, because there's a lot of well-behaved ones, this being one of them. Now, admittedly, this will get to 4 or 5 foot in its clump, but it'll always remain clump forming, but it will make a 4 or 5 foot clump, and then it sends up the most magnificent seed heads of any of the grasses, really. And this one's Cortadera richardii, so named after me, really. No, not really. But it's called richardii, and it's the Australian toto grass. Sorry, the New Zealand toto grass. And it is absolutely a wonderful, it's a cracking one to have. It has this elegant look all year round. In the worst of the winters, I suppose it can fail a little bit, but generally it has this lovely look about it, and you have to be careful with most pampas grasses because they do cut you if you run your fingers in the wrong way. Now I can see already it's setting its flowers, so you can see, let's see if I can point it out to you. This one here, that's a flower head. That's a flower head. Another one there. So last year it only well, for the last 2 years it's only produced me 1 flower head each year, but this year there's already 3 I can see, 4, 5, 6. There's probably going to be about 10 this year. So year on year they're going to produce more and more and more flowers. So that's definitely worth getting, but you need a lot more room for that one. So position it well and think about it. It will take dry conditions as well. It's in this dry area. We're on a bit of an hillside here, so it does drain away quite quickly, but it's certainly worth getting. And this one here, this is Festuca paniculata. And there's the seed heads, and it looks, for all intents and purposes, like a wild grass, but it's quite an early one, and it has this lovely mounding tuft. And again, it's not too much trouble at all. It gets taller as it gets older. It's only about 3 foot now. It should make it up to, in fact, the back ones are probably getting more to where they should be, 4 foot. They produce them sort of flattish, I would say, flattish seed heads. Again, if we can try and focus this in, it produces a nice flat seed head, and they will seed themselves around, and you'll find quite a few of those in. But they're really nice for an early season interest, and that's more early why I have that one, because once spring's passed, the flowers have done, it's kind of gone. So you'll get about a month and a half out of that, and then you might as well cut it back down to nothing. But nevertheless, it's really nice grass to have, and looks good in a wild area. While we're here, we'll go for this one here. This is Lamus arenaris, and it's one I tell people about all the time. So keep an eye on this one, because this is an aggressive runner, and it's one that really lives on the seaside, on the banks, on the sand dunes. And it produces a straw coloured, in fact, here we go, there's one coming up already. This wheat-like type seed head, it produces that, and then that will go a wheat colour, and that'll look absolutely beautiful once it gets going. But I like to keep them in some sort of a pot, especially a clay pot, because blue does suit the clay colour, which looks really nice. So that's all right. That's me in the window there, as you can see. Don't like to show myself too much, because it's not about me, it's about the plants. Now this here, this is by far one of my favourite grasses, definitely the mid-sized ones. And this is called China Cloaruba, and it's a New Zealand grass, and it's just wonderful. And I can never ever show you the different colours within it. It has greens, olives, yellowy, browns, oranges, the lot. That one has. It'll take about 5 years to get to where it needs to be. At least 5 years to get to maturity. But it's worth waiting for. It's a clump former, it's evergreen. I have several of them in this garden. There's one in the other border down there, as you can see. There. And then I've got another one in here. There you go, that's another one. And it's a cracking grass. And good for all year round interest. But as I'm talking about quite early season grasses here, that fits the bill perfectly. Now this one is new to me this year. I've resisted getting it before, and I wish I had bought it a lot earlier in my gardening career, but I haven't. Now this is called Sessilaria nitida, or Sessilaria nitida, and it has this lovely fresh look about it, and it's spiky. Those leaves, if you actually touch them with a palm of your hand, they are quite spiky, a bit like a Steepa gigantea. They're a bit like that, so they're quite stiff, but they produce an early season seed head, and these have been seeding now for at least, I'd say, a month. These have been seeding, and I'm expecting to find some seeds of these. I've tried growing them from seed. When I've got this plant, I actually removed the seed heads, but it didn't really take. So what I'm hoping for is to find one or two in this area, and we'll try look for those as that time comes, and we'll pick them out, because they're definitely worth saving. So the Calamagrostis calforsta that I talked about, that's a single specimen, and they look really nice as a single specimen and a clump forming specimen. So there you go, that's the look you can get from that. Now, although this isn't seeding yet, this is a Malinia, and Malinias are definitely worth having for early season interest, because this is the look you get. Yes, I know it's a bit boring, but once those flower heads come up, you'll see that's going to look absolutely wonderful. Well, that's a Malinia. So, to be quite honest with you, a lot of people don't get grasses because they do look pretty similar at a certain time of year. And I do get that, I understand that fully, but still worth having. Now this is a miscanthus, and it's like a condensatus type called Cabaret. And it's an absolute beauty. It has this lovely stripy look about it, and it's a clump former, only makes it to about 4 or 5 foot. It will make that within this season very easily indeed. So it's a real nice one to consider. So we'll look at another miscanthus, and this one's Jubilaris. This is giganteous type. And this is that longitudinal striping in it, and it varies from leaf to leaf, so it's a really interesting one. That'll make about 7 foot this year. It's a lovely clump forming one, and it'll look absolutely stunning once it's in full leaf. Now next to it is a Deschampsia, and this one is called Silver Mist, this particular one, a Bressingham hybrid, and it produces these lovely sparkly little seed heads. And most Deschampias do that, but they're definitely worth having. There are different varieties, and once they all start seeding, we'll do a little video on just those, because they're worth mentioning a little bit more. So we've got Electrotrichum sempervirens here, and this is quite an early grass, and it's an evergreen or ever blue, and it's a very nice blue colour, and it's almost like a festuca on steroids, really, but better. This will make 3-4 foot eventually. It takes us quite a while to get to that, but eventually it will make that size. And as you can see, it's sending out its seeds already. They will get taller than that. They'll be at least 2 if not 3 foot above the main plant eventually, and they look really nice. Now that particular one is called Sapphusfrudel, and that means fountainous. So that's worth seeking out. Now, Electrotrichum sempervirens, to be quite honest with you, I feel, unless I'm being sold the wrong one each time, I've bought several different Sapphusfrudels over time, and I can honestly say that I've not really noticed any real difference between that and the ordinary Electrotrichum. So again, another Malinia here, and that one's called Windsow, and I like Windsow and I like Windspiel. Both are good, and they produce really, really tall seed heads that are definitely going to reach up to the top of that post on the left there. So I think as far as early season grasses go, I think that's enough to whet your appetite and for ones to look out for. But we're going to end with this one. As always, this is Miscanthus Lutaria riparius, and it is a stunner. I love this one. It comes with a warning that you need to contain it because it is a runner. I use a bamboo root barrier for this one, as you can see around there, and I've had to contain it with that. That root barrier runs all the way around this sheep bale feeder, and it goes down 900 millimeters, so it definitely contains it, or it is an absolute stunner. As you can see, it's only probably a third of the size. I'm hoping this year that it will make a minimum of that owl, and I'm hoping really, truly, that it's going to go at least a foot, if not 2 foot above it. Where it comes from in its native land, which I think is Taiwan, I'm not sure, Southeast Asia, I'm not sure, 100%, I should have really checked that up, but I haven't. It will make 25 feet. It is a true monster. And it has these thick stems, and I love this one. I harp on about it all the time because it's such a good doer, and it's windproof, so it doesn't shred. 1 or 2 leaves will shred in the wind, but generally it's pretty windproof, and it is unlikely to set flowers for us in the UK, but worth seeking out. So that's it. Early season grasses to look out for and to whet your appetite. Hopefully you'll look back through the video and have a look, and you'll probably invest in 1 or 2 yourselves, hopefully. And hopefully I've inspired you to do that. So I'll touch on the next one. Ta-da!